Don't tell them you can see.
I stared at the note for a long time, unable to stop myself from wiping the cold sweat off my forehead. Due to my limited vision, I had barely left the house in the past 6 months, and the only people I interacted with were my parents and sister.
So, the them on the note must refer to my parents and sister. But why shouldn't I tell them I can see? They are the closest people to me. Shouldn't I share the good news of my restored vision with them immediately? Just as I was pondering this, there was a knock on the door.
Alex, it's time for your medication.
It was my mother's voice. After I lost my sight, my mother quit her job to take care of me at home. Thinking back on her tireless care over the past 6 months, I laughed at myself for doubting the people closest to me. I crumpled the note and threw it into the trash. With a smile, I walked to the door to let my mother in, ready to share the good news of my restored vision. But as soon as I opened the door, I froze. The person standing outside was not my mother. High nose, small eyes, thin lips, she looked sharp and harsh, completely different from my gentle and kind mother. Yet, her voice was exactly the same as my mother's. What was going on?
Alex, you're smiling. Is there something good happening?
Her voice was gentle, but she stared intently at my eyes, as if trying to confirm whether I could see.
Over the past 6 months, I had been so downcast that I rarely smiled. My sudden display of happiness naturally aroused her suspicion.
I suddenly remembered the words on the note. Don't tell them you can see. My heart started pounding. What would happen if they found out I could see? But I didn't dare to take the risk, so I made an excuse.
Whether I smile or cry, it's still a day. It's been 6 months, I've come to terms with it.
Hearing this, the smile on her face faded, and she seemed a bit disappointed. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, she suddenly brought her 2 fingers together and thrust them towards my eyes. I dug my nails into the flesh of my palm, using the pain to fight the instinct to dodge. I stared straight ahead, not even blinking. I was betting that she wouldn't harm me until she was sure I could see. Sure enough, her fingers stopped just a few centimeters from my eyes. Lowering her hand, she resumed her gentle smile and walked towards the bedside table with a tray.
It's good to come to terms with things. Here, take your medicine. Dr. Brown said there's still hope for your eyes.
Her words were comforting, but I could see that as she moved, her head kept turning, and her eyes were fixed on me. She still hadn't let go of her suspicion.
I pretended to be dazed, fumbling my way to the bed. Mom, just leave it there. I'll take it after a nap.
This woman was clearly not my mother, and I was suspicious of the medicine she provided. Given her earlier actions, if I regained my sight, she would likely harm me. The medicine she offered might not only fail to treat my blindness but could even worsen it.
Dr. Brown said you need to take it at the prescribed time for the best effect.
Seeing her determination, I had no choice but to fumble for the pills and put them in my mouth, making a swallowing motion.
Good, you're such a good child. Now, get some rest.
She was satisfied and walked towards the door with the tray. She walked backward, her eyes still fixed on me, only closing the door when she reached it. As the door closed, I finally breathed a sigh of relief, my mind swirling with questions. Who was this woman pretending to be my mother? What was she doing in my house? Where was my real mother? I got up and walked to the door, ready to go out and investigate. But then I realized something was off. There were no footsteps moving away after the door closed. In my mind, I pictured the woman standing outside the door with the tray, her eyes fixed on the door. A shiver ran down my spine as I walked back to the bed, muttering to myself.
Where's my phone? Oh, here it is.
Sitting back on the bed, I waited for a long time until I finally heard footsteps gradually moving away. Only then did I quietly get out of bed, carefully pushed open the door, and looked around to make sure no one was there. I went downstairs to the living room. Lily was sitting on the sofa watching cartoons, holding a teddy bear in her arms.
Brother, why are you downstairs?
Her voice was sweet and innocent, unmistakably Lily's, but the face was completely unfamiliar. And I noticed the teddy bear in her arms was full of cracks, as if it had been torn apart. As she smiled at me, her hands continued to tear at the teddy bear, one of its legs already half torn off. Her smile grew more satisfied.
Just came down to get my Rubik's Cube. I'll play with it when I wake up.
To avoid suspicion, I fumbled my way to the coffee table, picked up the tactile Rubik's Cube, and prepared to go back upstairs. Just then, John's voice came from the kitchen.
Alex, I just bought a nice pork leg from the market. I'll make something special for lunch today.
I turned to look, and John was wiping his freshly washed hands as he walked out of the kitchen. But that face wasn't John's face.
Through the gap in his arms, I could see that what was on the cutting board was not a pork leg, but a human leg.
It took all my willpower to control the urge to retch, forcing a stiff smile.
Thank you, John, but I'm not really in the mood for pork today.
With that, I turned and slowly climbed the stairs. As I ascended, I felt two pairs of eyes watching me intently until I closed my bedroom door. Sitting back on my bed, I covered my mouth and started to cry.
Those 3 people in the house aren't my real parents or sister. Where are my true family members?
I thought of the human leg on the chopping board and the times I had eaten braised meat, sweet and sour ribs, and bone soup. A wave of nausea washed over me. After getting sick into the trash can, it took me a while to recover.
If they harmed my parents and sister, why leave me alone?
In the past 6 months, no one but my parents and sister had entered my room. Who had placed that note under my bed? Lost in thought, I heard a knock on the door.
Brother, are you awake?
I'm awake, Sophie. Come in.
It had been nearly an hour since I went upstairs. If I hadn't woken up by now, it would be suspicious. With a creak, the door opened, and Lily walked in, holding her cracked doll. I watched as she lightly jumped onto my bed, her little face seriously scrutinizing me.
Sophie, do you want me to play hide and seek with you?
Because I couldn't see before, the only game I could play with my sister was hide and seek. But thinking about how I had played hide and seek countless times with a stranger made my heart fill with dread. Sophie grinned and slowly leaned close to my face.
Actually, brother, you can see now, can't you?
Though phrased as a question, it was stated as a fact, and coming from a little girl, it made cold sweat break out on my forehead.
How could that be? If I could see, I would have told you right away, so we could go out and play together.
I tried to stay calm, betting that she was bluffing.
Hee hee, no need to deny it, brother. Aren't you curious how I figured it out?
Listening to her logical analysis, my heart sank.
Could a little girl have such logical thinking? She definitely isn't my sister. But what should I do now? Should I capture her and threaten the fake parents outside?
But if she knew I had discovered their secret, why would she dare to come see me alone? Wasn't she afraid I would capture her and use her as leverage?
Are you thinking of capturing me to threaten my parents?
Her words shocked me.
Actually, they aren't my parents. My real parents met the same fate as yours.
Her eyes suddenly filled with extreme sadness.
They are a pair of serial criminals. Because I looked like their deceased daughter, they harmed my parents a year ago and took me away. Afterward, they disguised themselves through surgery to look like my parents, evading the police. 6 months ago, when they were about to be exposed, they staged a car accident. In that accident, your parents and sister died, and they took me to pose as your family, once again evading the police.
A storm of emotions surged in my heart. So, the car accident wasn't an accident, and my parents and sister had long been gone.
Under their threats, I had to obey them, but I was always looking for a chance to escape. However, each time I was caught and mistreated, I had to give up and instead look for an ally, which is you. But before you regained your sight, I didn't dare tell you the truth because you wouldn't have believed me. The note under your bed was placed by me, just in case you regained your sight suddenly and exposed yourself in front of them.
So, the note was from Lily. This made me believe her story.
If that's the case, why didn't you call the police?
Call the police? No, with their nature, they would harm us before the police arrived.
Then what should we do next?
Since Lily had been planning an escape for a long time, I naturally sought her advice.
They moved here to avoid attention. They stayed to take care of you to fully integrate into your life, making their disguise more convincing. So, what you need to do now is to comply with them, making them think you will never regain your sight. Once they let their guard down, we'll find a chance to escape.
I nodded in agreement. At that moment, footsteps approached the door. Lily and I exchanged a glance and began our act.
Sophie, where are you hiding? I'm coming to find you.
Lily silently got off the bed and hid in the closet. I got up and pretended to search around. Soon, the door opened, and Emily walked in with a gentle smile on her face.
Alex, it's time to study.
Mom, can I stop learning those complicated Braille characters? I can listen to books anyway.
Braille is a tactile writing system designed for the visually impaired. It consists of different combinations of raised dots created on paper using a Braille slate, Braille machine, or Braille printer.
Mom is doing this for your own good. You're only 18, and you'll need to go to college. How can you manage just by listening?
2 months after I lost my sight, she arranged for me to learn Braille every morning.
All right, I nodded weakly.
At this moment, Lily pushed open the cabinet door and came out.
Mom, let brother stay with me a little longer.
Emma patted Lily's head. Your brother needs to study. He'll play with you after he's done, okay?
Lily nodded, her body trembling slightly. Okay, Mom.
Sophie is such a good girl.
Downstairs in the study, I sat at the desk and started my Braille lessons, with Emma by my side to help. Previously, I didn't mind, but after discovering Emma's true identity, being with her felt like an immense torture. The effort to resist the urge to escape took more energy than the study itself. After more than an hour, Emma's phone rang. She answered it softly.
Mrs. Smith, you finally called me back. It was my fault yesterday. I'll come over and apologize in person.
I suddenly remembered that Emma had argued with Aunt Linda next door yesterday because Aunt Linda had belittled me while boasting about her own son. Emma seemed to be deeply into her role. Could she really be treating me as her son? No, she's a criminal. How could that be?
After hanging up, Emma looked at me. Alex, keep studying. I'll be back soon.
Okay, I nodded, feeling a surge of joy. With John not at home and Emma going out, wasn't this the perfect chance to escape?
Emma walked out of the study backward as usual. I saw her pick up a pair of scissors from the coffee table and leave.
Isn't she going to apologize? Why take scissors?
I didn't have time to think. I went to the living room and urged Lily.
Mom went to apologize to Aunt Linda. We can escape now.
But Lily shook her head. No, this isn't the right time. Go back to the study. She'll be back soon.
Her face was full of fear.
I didn't understand, but the fear on the little girl's face scared me. I obediently returned to the study and sat back at the desk.
Soon, Emma returned with the scissors, a satisfied smile on her face.
Mrs. Smith forgave me. We're back to being good friends.
However, I clearly saw a fresh stain on the corner of her shirt. I knew Aunt Linda had probably met a terrible fate. A serial offender is indeed a serial offender, taking a life over a mere argument.
My heart was filled with fear. Fortunately, I had listened to Lily earlier, otherwise, I would have run into Emma.
After enduring until 11 in the morning, my study session ended, and Emma went to prepare lunch.
Could I even eat the food she made?
However, Emma took a pork leg out of the refrigerator. I ate lunch with suspicion and trepidation. After a relatively peaceful afternoon, John came home around 4 in the afternoon.
Here, Alex, I bought you a top-quality fencing target. You can practice to your heart's content today.
Just like the morning's Braille study, fencing was another skill my parents insisted I learn. They claimed it would strengthen my body and boost my confidence.
But what was the point of a blind person practicing fencing? It only exhausted me every time.
In the past, I forced myself to practice to not disappoint my parents. However, today, when I saw the target in John's arms, I was stunned. It wasn't a wooden fencing target at all but a corpse. Recalling Emma's apology to Aunt Linda earlier, I made a bold guess: the corpse was Aunt Linda.
But why did John bring the body back? Remembering Lily's warning not to run away. Could it be that John hadn't gone to work at all and had been outside the whole time, allowing Emma to quickly hurt Aunt Linda and return?
The next second, more thoughts flooded my mind.
If this fencing target was a corpse, what about the previous ones? Could they also have been corpses?
Or perhaps people who weren't dead yet, just gagged, but ultimately killed by my sword?
Had I unknowingly been a murderer many times over? Dad, I don't want to practice fencing anymore. It's too exhausting.
Silly child, what's a little hardship now? One day, you'll understand your father's good intentions. It's all for your own good.
Placing the corpse in the storage room where the fencing targets were usually kept, John handed me a sword.
Come on, Alex, just thrust with all your might.
Looking at the lifeless body, I ultimately chose to turn and run, sprinting back to my room and locking the door behind me.
I don't want to learn anymore. Hoping this excuse would get me through.
John followed me upstairs, knocking on the door from outside.
Alex, judging by how fast you ran up the stairs, can you see now?
Darn, I was so scared just now that I forgot to cover it up.
No, Dad. If I had regained my sight, I would have told you immediately. The reason I ran so fast is because I've been at home all day and I'm very familiar with the layout.
Oh, what a pity! I got excited for nothing. But you still need to learn fencing, Alex. It's for your own good.
I didn't respond, hoping he would leave on his own. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. He had a key to my room. In a panic, I hid under the bed, praying he wouldn't find me. The door opened, the closet was opened, the boxes were opened, and then the room fell silent. Just when I thought he had left, a pair of eyes appeared under the bed, staring right at me.
Alex, Daddy found you.
The sudden fright almost made me scream, but I managed to hold it in. I crawled out, pretending to be stubborn.
Dad, I really don't want to learn fencing.
John stared into my eyes for a long time before finally smiling.
Alex, it's all for your own good.
For my own good, for my own good. All they ever say is it's for my own good. Making me hold a sword to hurt people is for my own good?
For some reason, a surge of anger welled up inside me, uncontrollable, and I blurted out.
Stop lying to me. You're not my real parents. My fake sister already told me.
As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted it, thinking this fake dad might harm me. But to my surprise, he didn't show any malice. Instead, he looked terrified.
Your sister told you?
Yes, do whatever you want.
The man in front of me trembled even more.
Did she tell you that my wife and I are serial offenders, that we harmed her biological parents and then pretended to be her parents? Did she say I orchestrated a car accident to harm your parents and sister, then disguised myself as your family to evade the police?
How do you know that?
What if I told you she did all of this? Would you believe me?
That's impossible. How could a child do all that? If you're going to make excuses, at least make them believable.
Have you ever seen the movie Orphan?
She's like the girl in Orphan, suffering from a rare condition that prevents her from growing up, but her soul is that of an adult. Think about it, when she talks to you, doesn't her logical thinking surpass that of an average adult?
I was startled, recalling how Lily had deduced from a small detail that I had regained my sight. Such observational skills and logical thinking were indeed beyond a child's capability. But at the time, I didn't think much of it, assuming she had matured early due to traumatic experiences.
The man continued.
In fact, it wasn't her biological parents who passed away, but her adoptive parents. And it wasn't us who caused their demise, it was her. We were visiting her home when we discovered what she had done. She told us that if we didn't pretend to be her adoptive parents, she would call the police and accuse us of the crime. The police would certainly believe her. My wife and I were terrified and had no choice but to comply. 6 months later, she grew tired of that monotonous life and wanted a new identity, so she chose your family. She orchestrated a car accident that took the lives of your parents and sister, then had us and herself pose as your family. You, unaware of the truth, accepted us as your real family. She relished the feeling of manipulating others.
But I once found a note under my bed that said, "Don't tell them you can see." She said she left it for me. If what you say is true, why would she warn me to be cautious of her?
Didn't I tell you? She enjoys manipulating others. She left that note to gain your trust, only to betray you at the last moment. She loves to toy with people's trust. When we first met her, we also thought she was an innocent little girl. Today, we harmed the neighbor because she instructed us to.
Listening to the man's explanation, I recalled the satisfied smile on my fake sister's face as she tore apart a teddy bear. A chill ran down my spine. This was psychological torment at its worst. Although the man's explanation was logically consistent, I couldn't fully trust him. Both the fake sister and the fake parents had issues. Suddenly, Lily's childish voice came from outside the door.
Brother, Dad, what are you doing in the room?
I exchanged a glance with John, who mouthed to me.
I'll distract her.
He walked to the door, opened it, and patted Lily's head.
Come on, Dad will play with you. Your brother needs to sleep.
Lily stared at John for a long time before finally smiling sweetly.
Okay, Dad.
The door closed, and the footsteps faded away. I immediately took out my phone, ready to call the police. Given that both Lily and the parents were problematic, calling the police was my best option. But before I could press the first one, there was another knock on the door.
Alex, it's time for your medication.
This time, I wasn't afraid. I opened the door and let her in, locking it behind her. I stared into her eyes and said,
What else do you want to say? Your husband has already told me everything. You should be dealing with my dear sister now, not me.
I expected her to be shocked, but instead, she looked delighted.
Alex, you can see? But are you having hallucinations again?
Before I could speak, the woman continued.
Dr. Brown said that although the car accident only caused your eyes to lose vision, your brain also suffered some damage. If you don't take your medication on time, you might experience hallucinations.
You can't deceive me anymore. I brushed her hand away. That fencing dummy wasn't a dummy at all. It was Aunt Linda, whom you harmed today. Do you think I would still believe your lies?
What body? What Aunt Linda did I hurt? Alex, you really need to take your medication.
Fine, if you won't admit it, I'll take you to see for yourself.
I dragged the woman downstairs to the storage room, ready to expose her lies, only to find a wooden fencing dummy on the floor instead of a middle-aged woman's body, and there wasn't a trace of anything unusual. Even if she had started cleaning the moment I went upstairs, it couldn't be this spotless.
But I had clearly seen it, and that man had admitted it himself.
Alex, do you remember when you had a high fever at the age of 8? That night, your father wasn't home, and I carried you to the town 5 kilometers away. Do you remember your favorite game as a child? It was spinning tops. Do you remember the girl you had a crush on in elementary school? Her name was Grace.
The woman spoke softly, recounting events that matched my memories exactly.
Could she really be my mother? Did I injure my head in the car accident, and everything before was just a hallucination?
Suddenly, my head hurt terribly, and I clutched it in pain.
Alex, take your medication. You'll feel better after taking it. I'm doing this for your own good.
For your own good, those words echoed in my ears like a demonic chant, intensifying my pain. The woman's face kept shifting between familiar and strange, like a demon. In extreme agony, I couldn't help but pick up the steel sword on the ground and thrust it at her. The sword pierced her heart directly. At that moment, Lily and John rushed over, their faces pale, holding a kitchen knife and an axe respectively. I killed them both with the sword.
I've harmed them! I've harmed them!
Before I could call the police to turn myself in, their bodies suddenly disintegrated into dust. I stood there in shock, and the next moment, I fainted. I woke up to find myself in a narrow alley. I saw my parents and rushed forward to hug them, only to embrace empty air.
What is going on?
I turned around and saw my parents approaching 2 boys squatting in the corner of the alley, playing marbles. My eyes widened because one of the boys was me, back in elementary school.
What state am I in now?
Before I could figure it out, I saw John walk up to my younger self and slap me hard, knocking me to the ground.
Instead of coming home to study after school, you're out here playing.
I started crying loudly. Emily tried to console me.
Alex, your dad and I are doing this for your own good. Only by studying hard can you get into a good middle school.
I had no choice but to follow my parents home, dejectedly, and start reading my books. Lily saw my state and mocked.
Brother, you're so useless, always playing around.
I didn't tell my parents that it was Lily who had persuaded me to go out and play after school. Watching this scene, I seemed to understand something. The next moment, the scene shattered, and I found myself in a new setting, seeing my parents again. This time, I didn't go to hug them. I just watched as they opened my room door. Inside, my high school self was hiding something behind my back. John pulled my hand to the front, revealing a martial arts novel. He snatched it and tore it to pieces, scolding.
You never learn. Instead of studying during the holidays, you're reading these useless books.
Dad, you know it's the weekend. What's wrong with reading a novel?
John slapped me hard.
How dare you talk back? You've got some nerve.
The slap hurt, but I didn't make a sound. I turned my head and stared at him. Emily tried to persuade me.
Alex, your dad and I are doing this for your own good. Only by getting into a good university can you make good money and have a bright future.
I said nothing and eventually turned back to my textbooks. At this moment, Lily walked in and mocked.
Brother, you're so useless, always reading novels instead of studying.
I didn't tell my parents that it was Lily who had bought me that martial arts novel. The scenes kept shattering, and I kept finding myself in new settings, but the outcome was always the same: being scolded by John, Emily saying it was for my own good, and Lily mocking me while she was the one causing trouble. I realized that these were all my memories, and everything that had happened before was just a dream. My parents had always used the excuse of "for my own good" to deprive me of much of the happiness I should have had. In my subconscious, I felt they didn't love me, they only loved me with good grades. To me, they were like demons. Lily had always liked to get me into trouble and then let my parents scold and hit me. In my subconscious, she was also a demon. After dozens of repetitions, there was finally no next time. I slowly opened my eyes and found myself lying on a hospital bed.
Dr. Brown, how is my son?
He's okay, we managed to save him. But you parents need to put yourselves in his shoes and not put too much pressure on him. If he had jumped from a higher floor, we wouldn't have been able to save him.
Okay, thank you, doctor. We understand.